Guidance is internal. Ignition sequence starts. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. All engine running. Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Permission to board. Permission to come aboard. Permission to board. Permission to bring me aboard. Permission to come aboard.
Welcome to the Permission Granted podcast. Here's DA.
All right, welcome inside the freshest edition of the Permission Granted podcast, everybody. Of course, I'm DA, and this is all off of the air stuff that you won't hear anywhere else. This is an interesting week, to say the very least. Maybe the most interesting week we've ever had in Permission Granted podcast history, and maybe the DA show's history, at least from the CBS Sports Network level. For those that are unaware, last Friday I filled in for the Doug Gottlieb show. I recorded my CBS Sports Minute because I was filling in for Doug. He usually does them. It airs on all of the affiliates across the country, and it aired on WFAN, as it always does, during Mike Francesa's show. And Mike didn't like it, didn't like that I had a ripped Hulk Hogan, thought it was low-hanging fruit in his term, or as his term was, the lowest hanging fruit, okay? And didn't like that I used my initials, said, didn't call me out by name, but suggested that I had only been in the business 15 minutes and that he wouldn't know me if I walked in the studio. So the whole thing is, in my mind, kind of completely ludicrous. It's so ludicrous that I have only been just kind of sitting back and watching this thing unfold like I'm living my own movie, like I'm living a movie of my life that's been played by caricatures, you know? And so let me give the background here, because I think this week a lot of people might have thought I was going to fire back and get angry. And, you know, I couldn't. There was no part of me that was angry, and I'll tell you why. The history of this is that I'm a native New Yorker, and I don't want to say I grew up listening to WFAN, but WFAN was the only sports talk station in town for a long time when I was in middle school, high school, etc. ESPN New York came along, but they've never really been all that relevant. They've never got very good ratings, and, you know, they just weren't anything that you had to go listen to, and in a lot of ways I still think they aren't. So the Fan was what me and my friends and my family always listened to get our sports. I mean, we were all, at least my family's a big sports family. I think probably me, I'm one of the biggest sports fans of the family, but everybody kind of cares, and my dad has always listened to WFAN on his way home from work, on his way to work. He really likes Boomer and Carton now, and I think New Yorkers, for a long time, had a real love-hate relationship with Mike and the Mad Dog. It's interesting to me to watch Mike and the Mad Dog in whatever it used to be, and now Francesa take on a national cachet, because I think for all of us here in New York, it always felt so New Yorky that it couldn't work anywhere else. And so when I was growing up, I never wanted to be Mike and the Mad Dog. I didn't even really want to be a sports talk host. But one of the reasons that I don't think any New Yorker could ever grow up saying, oh, I want to be Mike and the Mad Dog, is that what they had was completely unique. I mean, Mad Dog is just a frenzy of emotion, of opinion. He's all over the place, and you can't replicate that. And I think he was a Long Islander, a native Long Islander. I know that he went to school down in Florida. For Mike, I mean, nothing drips New York more than Mike, kind of sitting on the throne and espousing these opinions and always being the authority on everything. So you just can't aspire to something like that. And because they were so crazy and a caricature and would fight and would debate, and they would live in this kind of alternate reality where even real life was debatable like a sports topic. One of me and my friends' favorite bits was when they would debate the greatest presidents of all time, and they would do it as though they were ranking all-time quarterbacks. No, dog, you're wrong. You know, Truman dropped the bomb. You got to give him credit for that. Mikey, come on, you got to go FDR, New Deal. I mean, yeah, Mikey, FDR's got to be higher than that. Dog, Lincoln's your number one. He's got to be your number one. Freed the slaves. Like, you couldn't make that stuff up. So growing up, we listened to this. I listened to this, but it was entertaining, but it wasn't really real. You know, they would be great at sports talk, but it was like a fantasy sports land where these two caricatures were always fighting and whatnot. So to this day, now that Dog has left and it's only been Mike, To this day, when I get together with my extended family at Thanksgiving, it's always about, yeah, DA, did you hear what Francesa said? I can't believe what he said about Mark Sanchez or whatever. Like, we're always talking about what Mike did or Mike said or whatnot. My dad gets a huge kick out of Mike. I mean, all my family, I've got friends that still, diehard listen to Mike. And if you are of my age, 36, me and my friends, we listened to Mike and the Mad Dog from its early days. And now to see Mike where he is as this kind of national figure that's simulcast on Fox Sports, and it's kind of crazy because it always felt so hardcore New Yorkie that who else would care about whether Sandy Alderson needed to trade for another left-hander out of the bullpen outside of your hardcore neurotic Mets fans and New Yorkers. Like, who would care about the stuff that is so insularly New York? So when Mike blew up and now has kind of become a national figure in a lot of ways. Now, I don't know. If you're in Des Moines right now, you probably don't really care about Francesa. If you're in Fresno, if you're in San Antonio, he probably doesn't really register. But most people know him, and I think part of the reason is because there's so much New York media that writes about him that gets out to a national level. Like Jimmy Traina from Fox Sports loves Mike. Well, he has a huge platform, and now writing for Fox and used to write for SI, like that impacts everybody. Jason McIntyre, the big lead, that impacts everybody because everybody in the nation reads about that. Deadspin, if you write about it, the nation's watching, and I think when it happens in New York, it's bigger. So now that Mike has had Francesa Con, where all of his huge fans come out and kind of celebrate him, it's crazy. I actually went to Francesa Con with my buddy Pete, who him and I incessantly text about what's happening on Mike's show because Mike's callers are nuts. And they've nicknamed themselves the Mongos, which is just funny in itself because it suggests like they're kind of knuckle-dragging Neanderthal, human mongoloids that just care about like the minutia of New York sports. But because they're self-nicknamed the Mongos, they're kind of in on the joke. And if you ever listen, there's so many callers that call in Mike just looking to troll him to get him hot and bothered and yelling. And they just stoke the flame. And this, so now you have a 5.5-hour platform for Mike to just kind of be the authority on everything, specifically New York sports, and have his callers tell him how somebody's ripping him, how other guys are knuckleheads, how Mike is the best, and just kind of troll him into yelling and getting mad, And it's incredible. And so Mongo Nation is, I can't say enough good things about these guys. I met a bunch of them over at Francesa Con, and they all have such a good sense of humor about this. It's like me, you listen to Mike, and part of it is parody because Mike can get so mad, and some of his antics are legendary. Like falling asleep on the air is legendary, not only because when I'm on the air, I'm so wired and focused, and you're nervous about saying the wrong thing, and you just have to be on point all the time. I think it's a huge badge of honor that Mike is so comfortable that he could literally fall asleep because it's like second nature doing that radio show. For me, I couldn't even imagine it, and if I was Mike, I would have owned that. Now, Mike has kind of dismissed it and denied it and don't bring it up. If I was Mike, I'd be like, yeah, Sweeney was so boring I fell asleep. That's how easy this is for me. It's like Jordan winning a championship. Yeah, I'm not even breaking a sweat dropping 60 on you because this is so easy. I'm falling asleep during this interview because it is so easy for me to do this. I would own it. So these things are like from a different world. And so his caricature has kind of grown and grown and grown. And the Mongos know it. And part of the fun of listening to Mike is you don't know when he's going to trash somebody. You don't know when he's going to say something that it's like the total authority, drop the hammer, and you go, I don't know if that's right. But like there's no way it's not right in his mind. And part of it is you are drawn by this incredible kind of like pomposity and authority on everything. And I love it. I really love his show. Like I listen to it as much as I can, and now I can listen to it more because my schedule is I'm coming in when he's on the air. I'm coming into the studio. So when I was in high school, I interviewed Mike for my cable access show. We had a high school communications course that we had junior year and senior year. Obviously, I was totally into it. It was like the coolest thing for me. And And I kind of knew this is what I wanted to do. So me and the guys at communications in our class, my cousin Greg, my buddy Berger, and another buddy Steve, we created this kind of sports talk show where we would go out and interview people around the New York sports area. And this was back in the day when Calipari was coaching the Nets. The Nets let us come down. I interviewed Calipari. I mean, Sam Cassell I interviewed. Maybe Kendall Gill as well. We went to Nassau Coliseum and did a thing on the Islanders. I think we spoke to the Jets, if I'm not mistaken. We went to Jets camp. So it was like a dream come true when you're 17, 18 years old, and wrote an email to the Fan, or maybe not an email at the time, a letter, maybe called them. And they would say, yeah, you can come down and you can interview some of the guys. So we did like a piece on the Fan. And I interviewed both Mike, Dog, and Schmooze. I'll never forget Steve Summers, Captain Midnight. Schmooze, after I was done and I was signing off, I'm a nervous 18-year-old. Oh, my God, these are professionals that I listen to all the time. As I was wrapping up, stuck his finger in my ear like he was giving me a wet willy. And I'll never forget, and I see Schmooze all the time now, and it's a thrill for me because him and I have become somewhat friends because we talk all the time because he's on kind of the same time I am, so we always see each other at the studio. And I'll never forget that. And I interviewed Mike, and Mike was a larger-than-life figure. And so now, fast forward, that was 1997. Spring of 97 was spring of my senior year in high school. 18 years later, the fact that I'm doing a commentary that runs on Mike's show and Mike rips it is hysterical for me. It's absolutely hysterical. And I see Mike all the time in the hallways, so I don't really take any of this stuff personally when he says I've only been in the business 15 minutes or whatever. I mean, compared to him, I am young, and he probably looks at me, because I've only been in those studios, as the neophyte, which is fine. It's no big deal. And I just think this whole thing is hysterical and funny. And for Mike, he's been doing this for 25 years. So since I've been listening to Sports Talk, he's been on the air. So compared to him, I'm sure he's another young kid coming for my job, which couldn't be farther from the truth. I really like what Mike does. It's kind of crazy and kooky, and it's certainly not the way I would run my show, but I love his show. So when he calls me out, it's again, and then everybody kind of jumps to my defense, and this becomes a talk topic, and it's in the Post, in the New York Post, it's on the New York Daily News and all this stuff. It's you can't imagine what it's like to have been watching this unfold in front of you as though somebody did a biopic on your life, and you're going, I'm removed emotionally from all this, and this is really entertaining. So I really appreciated Gottlieb and Kincaid coming to my defense and ripping Mike, and that was cool because both those guys I really get along with. I really like both their shows. I think they really run really good shows, and it's a thrill for me to fill in for Doug and all of that. And so that meant a lot because we are part of the same network, and I think camaraderie and unity is really big on a network and big on a station, and the Fan is not good at that at all. I mean, they kind of all are factions, and I've never really thought that was a great way to run a station, but I mean, the Fan, it doesn't matter to the Fan. I think listeners love it, and the Fan's been around forever, and that it only kind of enhances these dynamic personalities instead of ripping anything apart. So it works for them. I don't think it would work for our network necessarily. So I really appreciated that. But I also wondered if those guys viewed Francesa the same way I do. I think there's a lot of resentment towards Mike in the industry because he comes off as so arrogant, and his way or the highway, and he rips everybody else, and he kind of sits on this throne, this virtual throne. I don't look at it like that at all. I think you look at it almost cartoonish. Not that Mike doesn't have credibility, but that he's his own caricature and entity. And unless I think maybe you're from New York, you might not get that because he can come off really harsh and pompous and arrogant and dismissive. And look, he's had problems with other hosts, and so I'm not dismissing that. I think, and that's everybody else's own deal, their own wars. I've just always looked at him as, this kind of Diet Coke swilling, napping on the air, kind of authoritative figure that you listen to because he was really interesting, but also laughed at because some of the stuff was ridiculous. I mean, at FrancesaCon, guys were dressing up like giant Diet Coke bottles. One guy was dressed up as a Diet Coke bottle with a pontiff staff because he's the sports pope. I mean, think of that nickname, the sports pope. Like he is that holy above sports, which is just sports. You know, it's like, it to me, it says everything. So I love those guys coming to my defense, but I couldn't muster the same anger or frustration. I could only laugh at this whole thing. And now the fallout, which I think at the end of the day, it's really about this. I don't think Mike dislikes me. I don't think he necessarily wants to kill my career, which obviously is not going to happen based on one or two things he says on the air. In fact, I think this week actually increased attention on the show and hopefully had some people tune in and be like, oh, you know, that guy's not bad. But more than that, he's just at odds with management. And I think the CBS Sports Minutes are representative of him hating management or being at odds. I mean, this is well documented that he's been with the management at CBS, he's been butting heads. And I don't know if it's about his getting a new contract or squeezing more out of his current contract or his Fox Sports 1 deal. I don't know. But it's very obvious he's at odds with management. And I just think the CBS Sports Network minutes are kind of like cutting into his platform, taking away a little bit of his moment. And I think he just hates it for that reason. Like, if you think about it, most hosts have to toss to the sports minutes across the country. Mike doesn't toss to it. Mike has John Minko, or I guess it might be Husler sometimes, or whoever is doing the updates, toss to it for him. So that, like, he doesn't have to, like, get his hands dirty, you know, tossing to a Jim Rome minute. So there's just so much ego in this industry that that it comes out it festers in weird moments and comes out in weird times. And I think this is just Mike hates management, and he never liked these sports minutes, and he certainly doesn't like a guy like me who he feels has only been in the business a minute, even though I've been hosting a show now for 13 years. I mean, it's not like I just walked in the studio 6 months ago and I'm like, hey, give me my first radio show. That it just all blew up. He was like Mount Vesuvius. And the funny thing is that Mike has talked about me on the air years ago when I had applied to do some of the overnight stuff when they were changing overnight shifts. This probably was like 2005. I was still in Kansas City, and I applied for that job when they changed the overnight shift. It might have been when Beningo, I don't know, Beningo was already middays, but they were changing the overnight shift. And I applied for it, and I did some shows there, and him and Dog were like debating back and forth the merits of guys, and you know, they brought me up and they were talking about me. Now, look, this is over 18 years, but I've interviewed Mike specifically in high school. He's talked about my show on the air and me applying for that job, and I see him every day for the last minimum 6 months, 7 months since we've been on the new shift, but more like 2.5 years. Because I've now been in those studios for that long, and I've done weekend shows on the Fan forever, etc. So, like, it really is more about him creating the narrative of how much he hates the sports minutes and this is why than I think it really is about me. And that's also really entertaining because it's part of Mike's facade of, like, everything is beneath me, even the people doing the sports minutes. So I don't know. The whole thing has been incredible. I've been just loving the Twitter mentions and the Facebook stuff, and I'm going to go to Saratoga. See, so I'm off the next couple of days, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. I took these days off. This is not like a suspension from CBS. Management hasn't told me anything, what not to say, what to say. I don't think they really even care. In fact, I wonder if they don't enjoy that this is really good for the network's attention. It's good buzz for the network. Anything Francesa says is like buzzworthy, especially when he goes after other media guys and media entities. But I think Mike's going to be at Saratoga, which is like his Valhalla. So I might see him over the next 3 days when I'm up there for the 4-day weekend, or the next 4 days, because I'm taking off Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but I'm not going up to Saratoga till Thursday, which would be amazing. I don't know what's going to happen. I haven't seen Mike since the whole thing blew up. Like Friday, I said hello to him, and we kind of exchanged a laugh or two after it started. But now it's kind of mushroomed into something else. So I don't know how he's going to react. I don't know if I'll see him and we'll have a laugh, or if I'll see him and he'll wave his pontiff staff and make me get sent to the gallows. I don't know, but I'm really excited to find out. So the week has been crazy. If you want to catch up on all the actual audio, I kind of compiled and put together all of the guys' response and Mike's response and my minute and how I felt about it and everything on our YouTube page, youtube.com/The DA Show. And that kind of is the perfect way to get the recap of it. Also, just check out my Twitter, DA on CBS, because all the Mongos have been tweeting at me, which are they're great. I mean, they're really, really funny and great, and they've had some really funny insight. So that's been a lot of fun. So it's just been, honestly, and then when Boomer Esiason, who's never gone by his initials ever, when he signed off his CBS Sports Minute on on Tuesday morning, and signed off I'm BE, I almost lost it. Because he's never said BE ever, but now it's like needling Mike, and Boomer and Carton will take a chance to needle Mike. And I was like, Boomer freaking Esiason is signing off with his initials because of all this. This is now officially the funniest week of my life. It is. There's no doubt about it. There's no doubt about it. I don't know if it's a career highlight. I know there's been nothing more entertaining. I've been howling, laughing at everything. Pete Prisco joined me the other day. I hadn't talked to him. We hadn't talked about Initials Gate. He came on and he said, please, DA, call me PP. I mean, I just started dying laughing. How funny is that? It's been crazy. It's been crazy. So I'll see you next week on Monday. I'll give you the recap of Saratoga. Thanks to everybody who's tweeted at me, Facebooked me, listened to it, whatever. I'm not saying everybody is going to love my show. You might have thought the CBS Sports Minutes sucked. You might have thought Mike was right on. You might hate them all. That's cool by me. I mean, I think they could be an acquired taste. I'm not stupid. But it's been great. It really has been great. I'm just I'm loving the whole thing. It's been so funny. And I think it's pretty important to just take it for what it's worth, which is hysterical entertainment in a dead period. And now that we have the Brady thing of the NFL thing, forget it. We might just descend into the NFL, La Brea Tar Pits here and never come out. And so we might not have anything funny like this to laugh about again. So anyway, what a great week it's been. And I'll catch up with you guys on the flip side. More from the Permission Granted podcast right now.
All right, welcome into Side B of the Permission Granted podcast. I'm the executive producer of the DA Show. My name is not SM, it is Mraz. Joined as always by not as always, Joe D's not here today. It's James Ward, the other associate producer of the DA Show. James, welcome back to the PGP.
Thanks for having me, and I actually am a JW. A lot of people call me JW around these parts.
Right.
But I am also James Ward.
James Ward, JW. And, of course, if you listen to the first part of this podcast with DA discussing the initials, you get why we're doing this with the initials. And an all-too-funny, bizarro, just another week in the DA Show where the Pope himself, Mike Francesa, started on Friday by really crushing DA on being in the business 20 minutes and using initials, which I immediately, when I had that tweeted to me, found pretty funny. And the whole thing just kind of blew up and spiraled out of control, and the callers really took after, riled Mike up on Monday. John Kincaid got involved, and the whole thing is bizarre. And I think me and James can kind of, lend some insight to this because, believe it or not, me and James had careers before CBS Sports Radio, sort of. We worked at WFAN and actually got to work with Mike Francesa a couple times on shows, right, James?
Yeah, I don't know if I'd call it a career.
Right, it was part-time work, hoping to get a full-time job.
Right, there were moments I was working at WFAN part-time and taking off from my real job and actually losing money to do it. So career might be the wrong wordage.
I was too, working. So what did you do before? What were you doing?
I taught guitar lessons.
Okay, well, like at a Sam Goody?
At a School of Rock.
A school?
The School of Rock.
Come on, like the movie?
There's a franchise of music schools called the School of Rock where they teach kids songs and lessons based around these songs. So I was a guitar teacher. So I was making like $30 an hour, and then I'd take off to come here and work part-time making
$10 an hour?
$10 an hour, yeah.
The part-time life in radio is not good. I was, not as glamorous as being a guitar teacher. I was a sandwich artist at Subway, which has been well documented, if you will, and I would have to do the same thing, especially on short notice when it came to working on Mike's show, because in New York, with me and James kind of growing up in this area, Mike Francesa is a big deal. Now, he may not be a big deal to those of you listening in Kansas and in Texas and stuff, but, he's the godfather of sports radio in a lot of ways, and he's a lot of the reason, us New York guys get into radio is listening to Mike growing up, Mike and the Mad Dog. Is that correct, James?
Oh, 100%. I'm here because of Mike and the Mad Dog.
Exactly. So for us, when it came time to work part-time, Mike has his set guys, and that's like the show on WFAN where it's hard to crack into. So anytime, somebody would bail out and get sick, if you were a highly thought-of part-timer, which somehow me and James once were at WFAN, we would get the opportunity once in a while to pinch hit. Not a lot, but every once in a while we'd work with him. And that was always a thrill for me. So, just seeing this DA thing get blown out of proportion, I know DA was a young New York guy, loving Francesa's younger. I know it just makes it funnier to us. And maybe it's not as funny to you, but it's funny to us to see, Francesa now, doing this about a show that we're on, I think is pretty funny.
Yeah, I agree. I followed it a little bit, and it was obviously my off days. I heard about the Kincaid stuff over the weekend. I thought that was pretty funny, and it just kept going.
It just spiraled out of control. I'm going to get into the Kincaid stuff, too, because I think that's a lost layer of this that I think is pretty funny. But for Mike, I know a lot of people are, killing Mike now, and, Gottlieb went on, and I know we're supposed to be all gung-ho CBS Sports Radio team. Mike is Mike for a reason, and he gets radio, and he gets entertainment, and Mike likes stirring the pot. So I could say this, firsthand. When Mike said that stuff, and Kohler said, and he kind of brushed it off, I know a lot of people got up in arms and angry about it and ticked off, how dare he say that about DA. My initial reaction, like DA's, was just to laugh because that's Mike being Mike. And if you know Mike, he's kind of half kidding when he says stuff like that about DA. Yeah, he might be aggravated about the sportsman and stuff, but there's nothing malicious toward DA. And it's more or less just he knows this will get a good laugh and and get people going. Mike's a lot smarter than people tend to think and realize, in my opinion.
Right. I don't know if it was completely, something that he thought up to stir the pot a little bit. You've seen him with some of the Sports Minutes stuffs, and he said it before,
right?
But I think a lot of it was because you've seen them joke around in the hallways before. There was not a lot of malicious intent to it,
right?
I think the most interesting part to me was the amount of Francesa people on Twitter, all the Mongos.
Oh,
they go crazy.
It's unbelievable how you Mongos out there are listening to Michael crazy. Perfect example is on Monday, a caller had called Mike and said, all these guys, talking about the John Kincaid thing, Kincaid's calling out all these guys to put their initials on the Sportsman's to tick you off, this, that, and the other thing. And Mike said, Mike said the famous line, "Bring it on," which then went viral, went in all the New York papers and everything like this, which ended up being great pub for CBS Sports Radio, by the way. He did that. And I calmly and kind of trying to be funny back took to Twitter and said, Mike better bring more than a pea shooter.
Yeah, that
if
was
he's going to go
funny.
to CBS Sports Radio. So now, for those who listen to the DA show don't know what the pea shooter reference is, it's a famous Mike thing when people are coming after him in the ratings, they come after him with the pea shooters. That's all I was doing was making a joke. But the Mike Francesa Mongos came after me. Who are you? Nobody knows who you are. Nobody listens to you.
I didn't realize that you had an exchange like that.
Right. It makes no sense.
WFAN Audio tweeted something. Who would be the face of CBS Sports Radio to go against Mike Francesa if they did a WWE battle?
Right.
And Brian Monzo, who produces Mike Francesa, tweeted, "It should be James Ward because he's a good-looking guy." So then a bunch of Mongos were like, that's the point. No one knows who he is. And obviously it was a joke amongst friends.
Right. I think that's what got lost between the Mike Francesa Mongos and then even some of the CBS Sports Radio fans were like, well, who's Mike Francesa? This, that, the other thing. Let me set a couple things straight. Number one, for the Mike Francesa Mongos who came at CBS Sports Radio were like, well, nobody knows who you are. Yeah, I expect you guys in New York not to know who any of us are or necessarily who DA is because, quite frankly, we're only on, whether you're listening online or in HD3 in New York. But as many of the DA show listeners know, we're on all over the country. We're not sitting here getting paid to do what we do, and DA doesn't have the following he has if people aren't listening. So you just sound stupid when you say that.
I hate when people say that.
Yeah.
And it's listen, it's on in every major market across the country except for New York.
Exactly. So you're living in a New York vacuum and a fool. And nobody's denying Francesa's success and everything like that. So let's pump the brakes. It was a good, wholehearted joke that has spiraled and it's become funny and it's become viral. But I can tell you that not sharing a newsroom because it's two separate newsrooms, but basically sharing a hallway with WFAN, guys, we're all laughing about this and enjoying ourselves, having a good time. Mike laughs about it. Mike talked to DA about it. boy, everybody's stirring the pot like this really is WWF versus WCW back in the day. What wrestling federation is better?
We're going to brawl tag team. We're going to have it out.
And some of us, like me and James have known each other a long time. We used to work with WFA, and there's a lot of guys who work at CBS Sports Radio that used to work for WFA, and we don't even have a softball game versus each other. That's how much we all like each other and get along.
Yeah.
I mean, can we get serious?
The whole thing is so funny. It's just so funny. And we see each other in passing so much. And now Monzo put that out on Twitter, and I had all these guys like, who is this guy? What does he do? And I just wrote back, there's a 50-50 chance Mike knows my name. Probably closer to like 30-70.
Well, let me tell you something.
But just have a good time with it. It's fun.
I will promise you this. And for those listening who, listen, Francesa, and want to get a little behind this, Francesa definitely knows your name. Francesa knows everybody here's name, but he plays it off like he doesn't because that kind of speaks to the aura. I thought Francesa didn't know my name for a long time until the Ranger playoff run happened, and he openly called me over into a conversation he was having with WFA and host Steve Summers and called me by my first name, and I did the look behind my shoulder. It just shows that Mike pays attention to everybody here and everything. So when he said that comment like, I wouldn't know Damon if he walked in the studio, and then he's having a conversation with DA 10 minutes later. Don't let Mike fool you. He knows who everybody is, and because that's Mike, and it puts on the charade, and that's what makes it funny, makes it comical. Right. It's a whole perch thing. And I love it, and I think it's great, and I think that's entertaining. And that's exactly what he does. James Ward hocking up a lung here. You going to be all right?
I've had this sick, cold cough thing for 2 months. It just never goes away.
Unbelievable. Well, before we wrap up, I want to bring up the Kincaid thing because John Kincaid got in the mix on Sunday morning, and he had called for all the people doing Sports Minutes to use their initials, which I actually thought was pretty funny and kind of creative, and it was a good spin on it. And I know that Doug Gottlieb did it the first day with the DG, and then on Tuesday, Boomer Esiason did it with the BE.
Boomer did BE? I didn't hear that.
Which was very funny. But notably, besides Jim Rome, the other guy who did not do it was John Feinstein with the JF. John Feinstein, I believe, did not do this because if you look at Twitter, him and Kincaid got into a little bit of a rift after this, which was hysterical. And this is the part that kind of got lost in the whole shuffle. James, are you even aware of what I'm about to tell you?
Oh, I am totally aware of what you're about. I laughed about it so hard.
It was unbelievable. So Kincaid does this, whole thing where he calls out Feinstein along with others to go with the initials. And Kincaid tweets, and Feinstein the next day tweets at Kincaid, essentially calling D.A. Damon and says something about the Redskins thing. And it was a shot, apparently, at when Kincaid used to fill in for John Feinstein on CBS Sports Radio. Kincaid used to do the opposite of what Feinstein did, not using the Redskins name, and Kincaid used to do it as much as possible. That apparently now John Feinstein's no longer hosting on CBS Sports Radio, still obviously holds some ill will because in that back and forth, Kincaid kind of went with like an LOL, I love you, John, and Kincaid was having, and Feinstein was having none of it. So it was almost funny to see that relationship unravel on social media, all based off the fact that DA did a Sports Minute, which, by the way, was a lame-o Sports Minute, which got lost in this whole thing, too, on Hulk Hogan.
Hey, some days you got to do two. Right. One of them's not going to be great.
Exactly, and I'll get to that in a sec. But so they got the Hulk Hogan, leads to DA doing this, leads to Francesa going off, leads to John Kincaid doing this, which leads to Feinstein doing this. So this the butterfly effect of now having the Feinstein-Kincaid rivalry, I think, got lost in it. I think it's hysterical and great, and it's really like the WWE, WWF storylines where people are turning on each other. All hell is breaking loose. It's unbelievable.
Right. You expect you're going to have a brawl. Boomer and Carton are going to come down, and then one of them's going to turn heel, and the whole thing's just going to...
It's great.
It's great.
It's great drama before football season's unraveled here, what's gone on. And I'm going to close with the Hulk Hogan thought and what we had talked about with DA just now with the lame-o minute. There was nothing to really discuss last Friday as far as a Sports Minute went. That Hulk Hogan news broke. I was producing Tiki and Tierney's show that day. That took over the whole show. So I know when Mike says he's heard 4 of those things already on his show, that's false, number one. Because a host will never do one on the same topic, essentially, and Mike only has 2 different hosts do it. Number 2, DA in that spot, it's a Friday. He's about to head into the weekend. He has Bart Scott during the breaks. I know he mentioned this. And Bart's full of energy in this. DA's looking to basically kick the field goal and go home.
He's off on a Friday night for
right.
Happens.
He's got the ball to the 30. We're down 2. Let me get out of here. We just beat the Browns in a squeaker. That's what he's doing. Never thinking he'd get called out for that. DA's aware it wasn't his best work. We all know it wasn't his best work. But at the same time, put yourself in that spot. What are you coming up with there in the middle of July? Are we going to break down Cole Hamels? I mean, what are we doing?
Yeah. It's a rough spot.
It's a rough spot. So you had all that, and it led to all hell breaking loose, and it was one heck of a week for CBS Sports Radio, a network that apparently people in New York feel like nobody listens to. But I guess if you go to Las Vegas and put on 1140, you wouldn't hear us either, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, idiots.
610 Houston, lots of different big affiliates in big cities.
Yeah, but we don't exist. Hey,
Well,
what are you going to do?
No one listens.
Well, that's going to wrap it up for this strange edition of the Permission Granted podcast. I can already promise you that next week, on next week's podcast, we will have Dave Coulier, Uncle Joey. Is he not even Uncle Joey, or is he just Joey? From Full House, promo in the Full House reunion coming up on Netflix, all that stuff. Good comedian, so we'll have Dave Coulier next week. And maybe we start to get into a little football. Training camps are open.
We're here.
We're here.
Training camp's open. We made it.
It's unbelievable. So that's going to wrap it up. As always, you can follow me on Twitter at MrazCBS. James?
James Ward, CBS.
All right, that's JW. This is SM. Thanks for listening to the PGP.